In the last week's session, we started with the refrigerators and we looked into the heat engines, the cycle, PowerPoint cycle that governs heat engine, and we looked into refrigerators, the purpose of refrigerators. Essentially, I'll just give you a brief overview what is happening in a refrigerator. Refrigerator is a basically device that is used to transform heat from low temperature to high temperature. This is a low temperature. TL basically represents low temperature reservoir. TH represents high temperature reservoir. So the purpose of the refrigerator is essentially to evacuate heat out of a low temperature reservoir and obviously reject it to a higher temperature reservoir. And in doing so, we go through the vapor compression cycle. This is the vapor compression cycle. Uh, we looked into the coefficient of performance of a refrigerator. Essentially, when we were talking about the heat engines, we looked into thermal efficiency. And that means how much work could be extracted out of the heat that is being given to a heat engine. In refrigerators, you remember coefficient of performance, your desired output, what you require is essentially QL, which is the heat which is taken out of a cold refrigerated space, or which is the heat that is taken out of a low temperature reservoir. This is the desired output in a refrigerator, and in order to achieve the process or in order to achieve the task, we need to have a network into the system in order to run the compressor. Based on this, we defined the coefficient of performance. Desired output was essentially QL, and the required input was essentially work net into the system. Work net into the system, if you apply energy balance on a closed cycle or closed system undergoing a cycle, this is your closed system undergoing a cycle, you come to know that work net is essentially QH minus QL. This is your QH minus QL. So the coefficient of performance is essentially desired output, which is QL, divided by work net input, which is QH minus QL. And if you divide every term in this coefficient of performance, R represents a refrigerator, you would divide every term by QL. So essentially you'll have 1 over QH over QL minus 1. This is the coefficient of performance of a refrigerator. The refrigerator and the heat pumps, they essentially operate on the same principle. It's just what you want to get out of a refrigerator or a heat pump. Essentially, if you see your refrigerator is essentially working as your air conditioner. Uh, in an air conditioner or a split AC, if I place the AC in a manner such that uh, the side, which is the front side, which you normally have facing your inner side of the room, if I place it opposite, if I place my air conditioner in a way that the front panel is outside the room and the other panel is the back side is inside the room, what would essentially happen? Gee, what would happen if I place the AC in a way such that the front panel is outside and the back panel is inside? क्या होगा?
सा हीट गेन हो गई,
कमरे का टेम्परेचर को क्या होगा?
इंक्रीज कर देगा.
Very good. So essentially, a heat pump is a device which operates on a thermodynamic cycle. It rejects heat to the high temperature medium to maintain a high temperature. So it's like it's working like a heater. It is basically giving you heat. So if I place the split AC inverted in the sense that the front panel is outside and the back panel is inside the room, your AC would essentially be taking the heat from the outside space and throwing the heat to the inner side of the room. So it would be acting as a heater. So for the heat pump acting, which is acting like a refrigerator or an air conditioner, the primary function of the device is to transfer heat from low temperature to high temperature. This is basically the heat pump. It is basically taking the heat from our cold space. This is not your desired output now. In case of refrigerator, QL was the desired output. In case of refrigerated air heat pump or your heater, the QH becomes the desired output. The heat it is rejecting outside, what it was initially rejecting outside, this becomes the desired output for you. So essentially, you're not concerned, or you're not worried, or you're not thinking about how much cold your environment gets as heat is extracted out of it. You are essentially worried about how to throw the heat that is being extracted out of the cold space to the warmer region, which is your home. So QH becomes the desired output for you. The work net in essentially remains the same. It is the work of the compressor. This essentially remains the same. The essential thing becomes that how could you extract maximum heat out of the heat pump? Is it clear? Is the point clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. So in this case, can you modify the coefficient of performance? Because in refrigerators and heat pumps, you would essentially be working on coefficient of performance to evaluate the efficiency of your heat pump. Whether it's a heat pump or whether it's a refrigerator, you're essentially working on the efficiency is gauged by the term coefficient of performance. So can you identify how would you assess the coefficient of performance? Coefficient of performance, which is a gauge of the efficiency of
QH.
which represents heat pump. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you'll have desired output over required input. Again, in case of heat pump, what is your desired output?
QH.
QH becomes your desired output, and work input would remain same, QH minus QL, or it could also be written as work net into the system since you are running a compressor. So coefficient of performance for a heat pump, which is represented by HP, you have QH over QH minus QL. And if you divide every term by QH, so QH divided by QH, QH divided by QH, and QL divided by QH, you would essentially have 1 on the top, you'll have 1 at the bottom minus QL over QH. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, if you remember, COP of refrigerant was QL over QH minus QL. So if I say, let's say I say that COP of heat pump minus COP of refrigerant. This would essentially become QH upon QH minus QL whole minus QL over QH minus QL. ये किसके बराबर होगा?
So 1K.
This would essentially become equal to 1. So I can write COP of heat pump minus COP of refrigerant is essentially equal to 1 Or I can write it in this way that COP of heat pump would essentially be equal to COP of refrigerant plus 1. That means the coefficient of performance of a heat pump under the same conditions would be greater than the coefficient of performance of a refrigerant. Clear enough? Is this point clear? Yes, no, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So under the same operating conditions, the coefficient of performance of a refrigerant and the coefficients of performance of a heat pump, they can be related by COP of a heat pump is essentially equal to COP of a refrigerant plus 1. Now, moving on to an example, let us have a look at this example. The example says that the food compartment of a refrigerator, as shown in the figure below, this is the figure below, is maintained at 4 degrees centigrade by removing heat from it at a rate of 360 kilojoules per minute. So this is your food compartment, which is at 4 degrees centigrade, and the rate at which the heat is being rejected out of it is essentially 360 kilojoules per minute. This is the rate at which heat is rejected out of this food compartment. It further says if the power required input to the refrigerator is 2 kilowatts, so the rate of work input to the system is 2 kilowatt or 2 kilojoules per second. Now you have to determine first the coefficient of performance of the refrigerator, which is COPR, and second the rate at which the heat is rejected from the room to the house. So it is, if this is your refrigerator, at what rate it is rejecting heat out to the atmosphere which is in the surrounding of this refrigerator, that is your kitchen or wherever you have placed it. So you have to determine what is Q dot H. So the first thing, kindly find out, I'll write down the relationship over here if you don't remember. COP of refrigerant is essentially QL over QH
Or
minus QL.
QL.
All right. Based on this relationship, you have to find out the coefficient of performance of a refrigerant. Could you please find out the coefficient of performance of a refrigerant? I'll give you 2 minutes. All right. Kindly find it out.
Three.
G, sorry. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Who was this?
Three.
Three.
Coefficient of
Correct. Very,
performance of refrigerant.
very good. Very good. Let's have a look at the solution first. So the coefficient of performance of the refrigerator, as I've defined, is essentially Q dot L over work dot net. And since both of them are expressed in terms of rate, so you can have the rates, the ratio in the form of rates. Time would automatically cancel out. Now, you know that Q dot L is given in terms of minutes. So in order to convert it into seconds, you would have to divide it by 60. So essentially this is Q dot L in minutes, and if you divide it by 60, it would be in kilowatts. That means kilojoules per second. So, and the work net in is already given to you as 2 kilowatt. The answer of having the ratio of Q dot L and work dot net in would come out to be 3. So the coefficient of performance of the refrigerator is essentially 3. Now, the second part was to determine the rate of heat rejection to the house or the atmosphere surrounding the refrigerator. So how could you find it out? Again, now you have work net in given to you and it is essentially equal to QH minus QL. If you express all the values in terms of rate, you'll have dot on top of all the three values. Work dot net in is essentially 2 kilowatt. Q dot H is something that you have to find out. Q dot L is essentially 3. All right.
सर 8
So,
किलोवाट्स होगा या 4 8
sorry. Essentially, just give me a minute. Here it is. So Q dot H is essentially Q dot L plus work dot net in. If you consider this as the closed system, you know the rate at which energy is coming in essentially is equal to rate at which energy is going out, since you assume that is working under steady state conditions. So the energy is coming into the system is Q dot L and work dot net in plus work dot net into the system, which is essentially equal to the energy that is leaving the system, which is Q dot H. So if you plug in the values, you have 360 kilojoules per minute. You have converted, this time you have converted 2 kilowatts into kilojoules per minute by multiplying it by 60. This would, if you combine them together, this would give you 480 kilojoules per minute. All right.
यस सर
Or you could also have it in terms of kilowatt by dividing it by 60. So essentially you would have the answer as 8 kilowatts. Clear enough?
8 यस सर
All right, good. Now, another example which is related to the heat pumps. It says that a heat pump is used to meet the heating requirements of a house and maintain it at 20 degrees centigrade. On a day when the outdoor air temperature drops to 2 degrees centigrade, the house is estimated to lose heat at a rate of 80,000 kilojoules per hour. So your house is at 20 degrees centigrade, and when the outside temperature is 2 degrees centigrade or minus 2 degrees centigrade, you are essentially, the house is essentially losing the heat at the rate of 80 kilojoules per hour. Now, if you have a heat pump which has a coefficient of performance of 2.5, you have to determine the power consumed by the heat pump in order to maintain this temperature of 20 degrees centigrade. What do you have to do essentially? You have to provide work net into the system, and you have to extract the heat out of the external atmosphere, and you have to provide the heat to the house. Now, if there are two things to be determined: the rate at which heat is absorbed from the colder outdoor air, this is QL, this you have to determine, and you have to determine the work net into the system. Do you have any information or any understanding how would you find out these two terms?
सर कोएफिशिएंट ऑफ परफॉर्मेंस हमारे पास है और सर नेट आउटपुट भी है सर
Net out.
नेटवर्क इन फाइंड कर लेंगे सर डिजायर्ड आउटपुट हमारे पास 80,000 किलो जूल पर आवर्स है सर उसको डिवाइड करेंगे तो
Yes,
सर हमारे पास 32,000 किलो जूल पर आवर आ जाएगी
very
नेटवर्क
good. But before that, but in order for an understanding for the rest of the students, very good. Why have you taken Q dot H to be 80,000 kilojoules per hour? Why is that you have taken the desired output, which is QH or Q dot H, as 80,000 kilojoules per hour? Why so?
हीट पंप यूज किया और सर वो उससे मैक्सिमम हीट आउटपुट हुई
देखें, the reason is your house is at 20 degrees centigrade, and on a day it starts losing heat at 80 kilojoules per hour. This is the rate at which the house is losing heat. Heat is moving out of the house at this rate. Now, in order to keep the house as 20 degrees centigrade, you have to supply the heat at the same rate so that the house temperature of the house is maintained at 20 degrees centigrade. All right. So if you have to maintain the temperature at 20 degrees centigrade for the house, you would have to cover up for the losses that the house is having in terms of heat. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is essentially your desired output as you want to cover up for the losses that the house is having on that particular day. The approach is very much clear. Yes, COP of heat pump is essentially Q dot H over work dot net in. Q dot H is 80,000 kilojoules per hour. COP given to you is 2.5. You just have to divide and it would give you 32,000 kilojoules per hour or 8.9 kilowatts. It is the power of the heat pump that is required to maintain the temperature at 20 degrees centigrade, temperature of the house. And second part is the rate at which heat is absorbed from the cold outdoor air, which is Q dot L. Again, if you apply the energy balance on this heat pump, you would have essentially work dot net in, which is coming into the system, plus Q dot L is coming into the system, and what is moving out of the system is Q dot H. So Q dot L would essentially be 80,000 kilojoules per hour minus 32,000 kilojoules per hour. This would essentially be 48,000 kilojoules per hour. Clear enough? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. All right. So now we'll have look at the Clausius statement. Calvin Planck's statement was the statement about the second law, which essentially deals with the heat engines. Another statement which basically deals with the refrigerators and heat pumps. This is the Clausius statement, and it states that it is impossible to construct a device that operates in a cycle and it produces no effect other than the transfer of heat from low temperature to high temperature. This is essentially, again, what is wrong with this statement? Why is it impossible? What is, why is this statement saying that it is impossible?
Sir, if it is possible, it means that the efficiency is 100%, which is not possible.
Essentially, it is saying that the device, there is no effect. Now, without having the work net into the system, having been able to transform heat from low temperature to high temperature is essentially not correct. So a refrigerator that violates Clausius statement of the second law is a refrigerator where you have no effect being produced. That means there is no work input to the system. This way, the net effect on the surroundings involves consumption of some energy in the form of work, in addition to transfer the heat from cold body to the warm body. So the net effect on the surroundings has to be there because you have to supply some work to the compressor in order to operate the refrigeration cycle. If you would not have that, essentially transforming a heat from low temperature to high temperature bodies is spontaneously or naturally not possible. Clear? So to date, no experiment has been conducted that contradicts the second law, and this should be taken as sufficient proof for its validity. Clear enough?